Bienvenidos, welcome. Thank you very much for being here on behalf of Jones Day and the Jones Day Foundation. We really appreciate the time that you are taking to be with us today in these very critical days for Brazil and spend a couple of hours talking about the rule of law in the region and in Brazil. Jones Day and the Jones Day Foundation have supported over the years many initiatives to promote the rule of law all over the world. As the largest firm in the US, one of the largest firms in the world with 42 offices in 19 countries and working for most of the most important corporations and financial institutions in the world, we feel that we have a commitment, we have a responsibility to promote the rule of law all over the world, not only with our work, but promoting initiatives like this. In fact, we started our collaboration with the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law last year. As a trustee of the Jones Day Foundation, I started working with Sir Jeffrey last year in June to develop a series of conferences and events all over the world, in the UK, in the US, in China. And then as a partner in charge of the Jones Day office here in São Paulo and leader of the Latin American practice generally, I thought that it was a very good idea to have the first international event of the series here in São Paulo, a rule of law event here in São Paulo. So among the many matters that are the subject of the research of the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law, we selected a couple of them that we thought that would be very interesting for a Latin American audience, for a Brazilian audience. We carefully selected the dates to avoid any problem, any conflict with Carnival, with Easter, with Tiradentes. So 7 months ago in October, we decided that the perfect dates for the event would be today, tomorrow, and to talk about rule of law, corruption, and judicial independence. I mean, now 7 months later, it seems that the day that we selected 7 months ago could not be more appropriate. I think that what happened yesterday in the Congress, that for a Spaniard like me was fascinating. What has been happening in Brazil over many months, make more relevant than ever to talk about rule of law, to provide a neutral platform for everyone to talk about their views on this. So we are proud to have here legal scholars, practitioners, and corporate leaders from all around Latin America these days to discuss the development of the rule of law in the region. Over the last decades, we have seen a continued surge in global trade and investment led by the major global corporations and financial institutions. But this economic globalization depends critically on the integrity of the legal systems to enforce contracts and to protect property from public and private misappropriation. In order to benefit from globalization, it is critical the stability and fairness of the legal rules. Effectiveness in enforcing contracts, protecting minority rights, protection of property rights, and freedom from corruption are key to foreign investment and development. And in fact, the development of many Latin American countries has been limited precisely because their legal systems are not reliable. The world is full of low-cost capital that could be deployed in Latin America, and the principal barrier for such investment is legal risk. Without the capital investment for economic development, millions of Latin Americans remain in poverty. So if globalization is to benefit a greater percentage of the world's population, aggressive development of the rule of law is essential. And legal systems that only imitate the rule of law, but can be abused by those on political power, are not enough. What we need are genuine systems of law administered by impartial, independent, and well-trained judges with able members of the bar who know how to present evidence and legal argument thoughtfully and with integrity. And in fact, this is already happening all over Latin America. Rule of law has never been stronger in the region. And over the last couple of years, we have seen unprecedented advances in many countries, like Mexico, like Brazil, Colombia, Peru, among others. And we as a firm, Jones Day, we have followed our clients, our global clients, to the places where the rule of law is developing in the right direction. We have now over 140 lawyers working in the region, fully integrated, doing probably, we have the largest presence of any global firm in the region, doing transactional work, litigation work, as we do in Asia, in Europe, in the US, and also here in Latin America with a very strong component of investigations, compliance, and fighting corruption. So, the conference is going to be organized in 2 days. On the first day, we have 3 keynote speeches and a panel discussion focused on different aspects of the rule of law. And tomorrow we will have a presentation on judicial accountability and independence, followed by panel discussions on prosecuting corruption, the rule of law in unequal societies, and the role of the legal profession. Please note that the conference is on the record, and we have journalists on the audience. So you are invited also to tweet and use social media using the hashtag rule of law. Thank you very much. We hope that you enjoyed the conference, and let me introduce you, Sir Jeffrey Jowell, founding director of the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law.
Thank you, Luis, very much indeed. As he has said, I am the founder director of the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law, which was founded just over 5 years ago as a London-based but fully international organization, which in those 5.5 years has become very active in the United Kingdom and all over the world. And we're privileged to be here today. This meeting is part of our global rule of law exchange, which we are delighted to be able to do together with and supported by the Jones Day Foundation. And we are also delighted on this occasion to be working in partnership with FGV São Paulo School of Law and their great dean, Oscar Vieira, who will address you after me. All over the world at the moment, we are observing painfully that commitment to democracy does not exclude the most agonizing conflict or dissension. In fact, it could be said that democracy provides legitimate and institutional outlets for differences to manifest themselves, rather than being wrapped under a pretense of uniformity or dull deference. Such outlets serve the greater interest of accountability. There is no accountability in countries which have no avenues for demonstration. There is no accountabilities in countries that have no opportunities to challenge official decisions or to express oneself freely in the press or through demonstrations, nor even to seek ways to seek the impeachment of a president. Instead, there is suppression of individual choice and expression in those countries, and all the sinister qualities of totalitarian rule that we have seen too often in too many places and for too long. Those countries may have the rule by law, but they do not have rule of law. Now, what is meant by the rule of law? I think this question must be addressed right at the outset of this conference, particularly because in this continent and in others, and in some world institutions, there are a surprising number of rule of law skeptics. Some of them particularly influential in the world of development policy, who maintain that the rule of law means all things to all people, and that it is unduly vague, or some have put it, that it is a contested concept. And there are others who, while seeing the force in theory in the rule of law, see it as an ultimately Western concept for the North rather than the South, or for the developed world, or for old democracies only. And there's some powerful voices in those directions by the skeptics. So let me deal with them very quickly, because we have a feast that follows. As to the first, that the rule of law is vague, I say simply that its meaning has been misunderstood and sometimes distorted, that it is not vague. The person after whom our Bingham Centre was named, Tom Bingham, wrote a book recently called The Rule of Law, which I commend to you all, where he shows very persuasively that the rule of law contains some very specific ingredients. And we feel that they boil down into 4 parts, each of which has a slightly different objective. Each of the parts under the rule of law have slightly different work to do. These parts are legality, certainty, equality, and access to rights. Each part does different work, but all parts are needed for the whole of the rule of law. Legality, very quickly, requires that we are all under law and not under arbitrary power, and this includes all public officials. Certainty requires that laws should be accessible and not be retrospectively applied, that change in law, of course, is possible, but it requires fair warning. Taken alone, legality and certainty can amount to rule by law or legalism, as is found in, say, contemporary China, or was found under apartheid South Africa. So it is the third and fourth elements of the rule of law, equality and access to justice, that are necessary to complete the dots in the picture. Equality requires rule of law to be enforced equally against the rich and the poor, the powerful and the marginalized, without unjustified discrimination. And at a deeper level, it requires equal concern for everyone's human dignity. And finally, the final element, fourth element, access to justice and rights, springs the rule of law into life by allowing individuals to assert their rights, private rights, human rights, through challenge by way of a fair trial before an independent court. So that deals with the question of the vagueness of the rule of law. None of those concepts can be accused of vagueness. Turning now to the second question of the universality or transferability of the rule of law, let's reject that view of the skeptics immediately. Would one wish on any country arbitrariness, inequality, uncertainty, and no opportunity to challenge decisions about their lives? The rule of law provides a means for democracy to be policed and for rights to be asserted. It shifts oppression to equal concern, to equal respect, and it shifts arbitrariness to accountability. Is this only for old democracies? Those who say that are surely condescending and patronizing, failing to recognize a universal need. Now, one of the subjects of this conference is corruption. How does it help to see corruption through the prism of the rule of law? It is helpful to look at it that way, as corruption offends at least three, and probably more, of the rule of law's different elements. First, it is contrary to the principle of legality, because it permits benefits to be determined by the price someone is willing to pay. It also, therefore, offends the principle of legal certainty, and of course, it offends equality by favoring those who can buy their way to benefits or to leniency. The world has been following the recent engagements in Brazil with alleged corruption, and it should be said immediately that few countries are totally exempt from this scourge on our public life. Yet, the war on corruption must itself surely be conducted with due regard for the rule of law, such as the right to a fair trial. And the same would apply to other wars, such as the war on terror, which, despite even its own urgent objective, should not wholly abandon fundamental principles of fairness. Returning to the theme of the universality of the rule of law, I could cite a recent document of the Council of Europe, that's the body that administers the European Convention on Human Rights. It has nothing to do with the European Union. It also has within it the Venice Commission, the Council for Democracy Through Law, which was formed in order to help the former Soviet Union's countries after they gained independence from Russia, and to advise them on their constitutionality. And I was privileged to sit on that body as the UK member with Ministro Gilmar Mendes, as the Brazilian representative at that time, and he and I saw that body develop a document on the rule of law, which I commend to you, which among those 47 countries with very disparate, different legal systems, came to the conclusion that the rule of law, as I have described it, adopting the Bingham definition of the rule of law, is a universal concept, and the same can be said of the recent exercise in the United Nations for this under the Sustainable Development Agenda, which has a goal of access to justice, which requires commitment to rule of law principles. Incidentally, the first rule of law paper from the Council of Europe's Venice Commission has recently been supplemented by another, just this last month, called the Rule of Law Checklist, which I commend to you, and to which the Bingham Centre again contributed, and which can be found, and which we could make available to you if you wished it. Of course, there are limits and obstacles to the spread of the rule of law. In all countries, in all continents, we find countries that are uncomfortable with a culture of the rule of law. Latin America may provide similar examples, about which we will no doubt hear in the next 2 days. But Latin America also provides shining instances of how a totalitarian culture can change and be replaced by a rule of law culture. I've mentioned above 2 reasons for skepticism about the rule of law, and there is the third bunch of skeptics who do not agree with what Luis has just said, is the view that the rule of law encourages investment, foreign direct investment. You might think that any prudent investment director assessing risk would invest in a country where the government was practically immune, would not invest in a country where the government was practically immune from legal challenge, where contracts were not enforced, where property could be seized arbitrarily, where the law could be changed retrospectively, where judges were the cronies of government ministers and inevitably ruled in their favor. Or another view, a competing view, is that that is not the case, and immediate profits are of more interest to companies and their shareholders. So we recently, with the law firm Hogan Lovells, conducted an investigation into this question. And we commissioned a survey by the Economist Intelligence Unit, which sought the opinion of over 300 senior decision makers at the Forbes 2000 companies with global annual revenues of at least $1 billion US. And our findings as a result of that very careful survey was that rule of law considerations, as Luis said, and agreed entirely with him, do influence foreign investment decisions. The rule of law was one of the 2 top factors guiding foreign direct investment. That document, called Risk and Return, is available on the conference website. It is called Risk and Return. As Luis Riesgo has just said, when we planned this conference, we had no idea that Brazil would be immersed in this testing time. And of course, we had no wish to take any side in this debate. But watching the riveting debate on the television last night, and even walking in the streets, 2 things became very clear to me. First, that Brazil these days is clearly committed both to democracy and the rule of law. And second, that Brazil is right in the center of a profound debate on the interaction between democracy and the rule of law, their respective roles and their respective limits. It is a debate, by the way, that is by no means confined to Brazil. Similar debates are taking place in the United Kingdom and in wider Europe today, although they are prompted by somewhat different topics, such as immigration, terrorism, human rights, and the issue of national sovereignty. But they are sometimes, if not quite as fierce as we saw last night, almost so. These debates are important, and they are necessary, because they allow us to learn from each other. I look forward so much to that learning experience from our very distinguished speakers, which we thank so much for having given up their time, and for the very distinguished participants. We look forward to learning from you in the next 2 days, and I welcome you all on behalf of the Bingham Centre to this important and completely timely event. Thank you very much indeed.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. É um enorme prazer estar aqui com todos vocês. Eu queria agradecer imensamente a presença das autoridades que, no momento de enorme tensão, se dispuseram a estar aqui conosco. Tendo em vista que eu estou sem óculos, eu só vou saudar a todos na figura do ex-presidente Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Eu gostaria de dizer do prazer e do orgulho que a Fundação Getúlio Vargas tem em co-organizar esse evento junto com o Jones Day e o Bingham Centre. A ideia de consolidação do Estado de Direito, a ideia de consolidação da democracia está no cerne do que essa escola tem como missão. Nós existimos para servir a sociedade brasileira, mas para servir a sociedade brasileira com um viés específico, que é o viés do aprofundamento da democracia, do aprofundamento do respeito à dignidade das pessoas, do aperfeiçoamento das instituições voltadas a assegurar o Estado de Direito nesse país. Então, esse evento está em absoluta consonância com tudo aquilo que nós acreditamos. O Estado de Direito, que hoje parece ser um consenso universal, é daqueles termos que nos atraem emocionalmente e, portanto, todos nós queremos trazê-lo para o nosso campo. Daí a enorme disputa que se tem quanto aos elementos que compõem o Estado de Direito. É muito comum que nós vejamos a reivindicação do Estado de Direito vindo de grandes escritórios de advocacia, de grandes setores financeiros, mas também daqueles que estão dentro de um presídio ou aqueles que estão lutando contra um regime autoritário. Isso significa que ele é um termo que é capaz de atrair a todos aqueles que veem os riscos que se tem do abuso do poder. Daí a sua enorme força, daí o enorme engajamento que setores vitais da sociedade, que são democráticos, postulam o aprofundamento do Estado de Direito. No entanto, o Estado de Direito não é simplesmente um conjunto, uma lista de elementos. O Estado de Direito tem que estar enraizado dentro de uma sociedade. E dos desafios para um seminário como este é tentar compreender quais são os elementos dessa sociedade que são indispensáveis para que nós possamos viver dentro de um regime de Estado de Direito. A América Latina, nesse sentido, que fez as suas transições, que apostou de maneira integral na construção de Estados de Direitos a partir dos anos 80, sem dúvida nenhuma, percebeu que é muito mais fácil derrubar os regimes autoritários do que construir democracias plenas e Estados de Direito sólido. E, em grande medida, isto é uma decorrência do nosso passado, mas também de estruturas de profunda e abissal desigualdade que dificultam o funcionamento e a compreensão de que todos têm que ser tratados com igual respeito e consideração. Espero que esse seminário contribua para a nossa compreensão de que maneira nós devemos avançar o Estado de Direito no Brasil. Eu agradeço mais uma vez o privilégio de participar com esses senhores da organização desse evento, Agradeço em especial ao Matt e ao Otávio Dias, que de fato colocaram de pé esse evento, e desejo a todos um excelente seminário. Muito obrigado.